Well, welcome, Courtney, Matthew, and Arsha to the Leaders Who Care series. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having us here.
Cool. Where are you all right now? Like, Arsha, where are you?
So I am in northern Westchester, New York City, in New York.
Cool, Matt.
Yeah, Bergen County, about 50 miles west of Manhattan.
Cool. And Courtney?
And I'm just about an hour south of Matt in New Jersey.
All right. You guys are all together. Well, I'm on the total opposite coast in Hermosa Beach, Los Angeles. So still good morning to everybody on this beautiful day, Friday before the weekend. Happy Easter in advance to everybody. Happy Good Friday. Happy. And I think a great way to start would be if you could, and this is the key, briefly introduce yourself as to, we'll get to the business stuff and all the wonderful things in a minute, but who are you? Where are you from originally? Where you are, with family, maybe your favorite color, maybe something you've never told anybody before, and this is the time you want to reveal it. I know that'll be big. So, who wants to go first? Okay, I'll pick then. Courtney, you go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. So, so I'm from a tiny town in northern Michigan, where my family is really grounded in the Midwest. But midway through my childhood, we started moving around to the South, which felt like moving to another country for me. And finally wound my way to New York City, which, for my family's background, my mom was the first in her family to go to college. My dad didn't finish college, was sort of like hitting the jackpot. And so being in New York and being able to experience all that it has brought to my life has been really transformative and and really exciting experience.
Cool, thanks. I'll do girl, boy, girl here. How about Matthew?
Sure. I grew up on Long Island, oldest of technically four. I have a brother 11 months younger than I and two sisters, two half-sisters. Went to school at Syracuse University, had a lot of fun there. Decided to do something called improv with Second City, which was kind of fun. Realized I might not be that funny, so I got into this furniture business in 2003. Been there ever since, basically. Lived in Asia for a couple of years, and I've always had a real passion for coaching, leadership, and just development in general, human performance. So,
What about family?
I have a son who's 15 and a wife who are behind the store making noise as if I'm not working or doing anything else. And I have a dog, Kobe, who's about to turn 6, and they're all playing literally 10 feet from me. So.
Oh, that's cool. That's one thing that happened in COVID too. Kids had to get used to, why isn't dad going to work? Well, dad is at work. Mom is.
That's right.
And they didn't get that. Thanks. Arsha, how about you?
So I am the firstborn American, across both sides. My family all originated from Armenia. So if you look at my 23andMe, it's pretty interesting. It's like 99.9% in that region, which is always good Thanksgiving dinner talk. Was born in Queens, went to Armenian school for, I think, up to about 4th grade. Then we moved to Long Island, and I think the assimilation process kind of began. Graduated out of high school in Manhasset, and then moved to New York City to try and kind of pave my way and career. Went through a series of different career changes.
Well, we can get to that. We can get to that in a minute. I mean, did you say you have kids?
No kids yet. Married for about 8 years. And we left the city and we now live in the country for the past year. So it's been a really interesting transition.
That's beautiful.
I love that Westchester is the country.
Country.
It's interesting.
Look how many trees there are. You don't have that. That's country.
That's country. We'll go for that. That's country. So none of you have revealed something that you've never told anybody before, right?
Well, Arsha and I have told each other everything, so there's no secrets between us.
Yeah, and Courtney pretty much knows everything too. So
okay, so cool.
We're a pretty tight-knit bunch.
So let's talk a little bit about what you were like as kids or teenagers, in terms of favorite things you did, or were you entrepreneurial? Were you organizing kids? Were you like playing music, sports. Marsha, why don't you start?
So as a kid, I was a complete tomboy, but then I also loved the arts. And so tomboys, they play sports and they hang out with the boys and they get their knees dirty and scuffed up and there's all kinds of accidents. But then on the other side of me was always kind of gravitating towards figuring out how to express myself as a person. So like my medium for that was really, painting and modeling clay and things like that.
Oh, super cool. I usually find threads that come through, so we'll see what happens. Matt.
This is going to sound pretty similar. I was big into art. Was fortunate to get a scholarship to high school actually for art. Was ink and stencil, etc. But also loved sports. Played sports my entire life. Coached sports a lot of it if I wasn't playing it. Grew up pretty blue collar. I mean, as blue collar as you're going to get. And we didn't have a lot of money, but we had a really nice childhood, a strong focus on education. I would say overall, I'm glad for some of the grit that the upbringing taught me. Important sort of foundation to grow after,
Which works in sports too. The ones that are the grinders that really have to learn the game and play the game usually end up being the best coaches at the end of the day also. So super cool. Courtney.
Yeah, so I grew up spending a lot of time outside too. I have really strong memories of long bike rides when I was young because I did live in the country for real, Arsha.
Wow.
And we also lived in Michigan, so it snowed for months and months and months out of the year. So I have really strong memories of spending lots of time at the library, and the library books got checked out for 2-week periods. So we each checked out 14 books, so that we had a book to read a day. And so have tons of reading. My family didn't have the money to travel when I was young, so learned a lot through that reading. And then, we also didn't grow up with a lot of money. So high school, I spent a lot of time working after school, out of school. And as I got older, I worked so that I could travel. One summer, I remember I worked 3 jobs. I would work, my dad managed a lumber yard. I would work there in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, I would go to a plant nursery. And then in the evenings, I would go waitress at Friendly's. And I did that for the first 2 months of the summer so that in the 3rd month, I could go to Europe and travel around. So yeah, that was my childhood, which was really fun.
It's interesting how you don't see as many kids getting summer jobs anymore, doing things like that, right? And I mean, you might see some lemonade stands here and there, but not a lot.
I had a lemonade stand.
There you go. You see,
my first day was at Friendly's, so there's it's all connected.
Yeah,
it is, and we learn a lot from those things, about how to start things. It's funny. I interviewed a young guy. Young, still young, late 20s, whatnot, and he said he didn't have a lot of experience. I noticed on the bottom of his resume he said Santa Claus parade, and I was actually the first Jewish guy to run a Santa Claus parade in Winnipeg, Canada. So it was I knew, and I've been on community, and I asked him, well, then you did that. What did you do? And he said, we had to work with the budgets, talk to the city, we're under the weather, we had to the sponsors, who's going first. And I said, yeah, you really don't have much experience, do you? So it's interesting what you pick up. So on the lines of your journey and what intrigued you to take your path. So I'll start with Matt. You got management, communications, and advertising education. I'm really interested to hear about the Second City thing because I love those guys. And then you're with Herman Miller, and then Noel, and then Miller Noel. Interesting how that happens. Tell us. And you spent some time in China, like you said too, with Hayworth, right? I believe.
Correct, yeah.
What intrigued you to take that path? How did that happen? And how did it feel to be with one company, another company, and then it's the same company?
Mark, like every little boy, I dreamed of getting in the furniture business. I made it again. Sorry, sir.
Yeah, that was my big dream too.
There you go. Right, exactly. I went to school originally for architectural design. I mean, growing up, people always like, you're either going to be an archaeologist or an architect or a lawyer. Those were the 3 things I got told all the time. But when I went to school, immediately found out how hard it is to become an architect, and then also, unfortunately, how little designers and architects make for a long period of time. And I was in a position of like, I really need to make as much money as I can to kind of help my family and do different things. And so, and I was lucky to get a scholarship to go to college, and I just knew I probably wasn't gonna be able to get all the money I needed to last forever going through that program. So I asked what was making the most money out of college. It turns out it was supply chain management and computer science. I said, I know nothing about computers at the time, so let's try the supply chain management thing on. So I did that, ultimately worked for Johnson & Johnson real quick, but did not like walking around a manufacturing facility for 9 miles a day. Like just it was a relatively antisocial gig, very tactical in nature. And then wound up going back to Syracuse, adding the marketing and advertising and degrees. And then I left and decided I'm going to do this improv. I did a year of my MBA also, which I was fortunate to get a scholarship for, and then decided I wanted to do something completely different. Applied for Second City, to be honest, in their writing program. After a couple of months, they were like, "Your writing's terrible, but maybe you'd be better on stage." I kept writing stuff, but as I was describing it, it was funnier when I'm describing it and living it out in real life. I feel like that's funny, but like the way it was on the written page. So then I just auditioned and kept auditioning and worked my way up through everything into live gigs and shows and all that kind of fun stuff. And then while I was doing that, I was a bartender, personal trainer, and I thought, just in case this doesn't work out, let me get a real job. And I just randomly applied to this company called Knoll. And when I went in there, immediately I was reconnected to this strong love for architectural design and started to understand the industry and realized that I could sort of parlay all the things I had studied into a fruitful career in that space. And then I've really been in that space for the most part for the last 20 years. I took a small little hiatus working for a marketing agency when I repatriated. But yeah, that's kind of the accidental, but I think sort of serendipitous journey that ultimately got me there.
Yeah, it's funny how I don't think things are accidental. So what you did as a kid, and then you get the comedy training and whatnot, how to deal with people, how to engage, etc., and it all comes into play. So it never got Saturday Night Live, huh?
I'll tell you what, I've been there a couple of times, like behind the stage on the furniture side, because we do NBC's NBC's furniture, and so you get tours. No, it's still a secret dream. I mean, I told my wife when I married her, I was 27 at the time when we met, and I said, like, just so you know, I'm probably going to quit everything I'm doing at 50 and become a comedian. So just be prepared for that. We'll try our best to save up for it. But
and I bet you she said that's really funny.
She did. Good luck, bud. No, she actually, the funny thing is my wife is 12 years older than me. She said, well, I'll be close to retirement, so you got to keep working. And I was like, oh, fair.
And that's funny. You should have said, yeah, that's funny too.
Exactly.
So how about you, Courtney? What intrigued you to you took finance, admin, social policy, clearly education and strategy were your thing. You've done a lot of great programs with great organizations. You did leave an executive search firm. I noticed that, which I don't take personally since that's part of what I do. And now Global Nomads. So why that path?
Yeah, so when I went to college, I was intent on being an English major, and my parents quickly put the kibosh on that. So for them, going to college was to get a marketable skill to get a job. And so my mom, I remember really clearly, as much of a reader as my mom was, she said, get the syllabus, read the books on your own. I don't need to pay for you to do that. So I went to the business school. I got a finance degree, not because I necessarily wanted to, but because it felt practical. And I got a job in New York City, which was, this amazing thing for my family, and did management consulting for a couple of years. And I hated it, and I was really bad at it. And over the course of that work, though, through some volunteer work, I met a philanthropist in New York City who eventually said to me, I'll fund it if you want to start a program to support first-generation college goers in Harlem.
Well,
I'm 23 at the time. I'm white. I'm from Virginia. I don't even know if I'd been to Harlem, but I'm 23 at the time. So I say, sure, I can do that. My parents were horrified. In their mind, I was leaving Wall Street, even though I never worked on Wall Street. In their mind, anyone who lived in New York City worked on Wall Street. So I was leaving Wall Street to go do this work they didn't understand. And so I did it. And I started this organization that's still around today, which is really gratifying. And I've continued to work in education and youth development ever since.
Yeah, that's amazing. I got my CPA because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and went to Deloitte. And the thing is, I was really good at it, but I hated it. And so I had to move on to other things, which will be you guys interviewing me for another conversation. Arsha, what about you? You also had an interesting journey, somewhat related to Matthew with the architecture and everything, right?
Yes, indeed. So I kind of if I had to bookend, I started out using oils to express myself and paint canvas when I was a little girl, and then that sort of evolved into this whole journey of figuring out, like, what is it that I'm trying to say? Who am I? And how does that match up with the right kind of career? And I didn't think I figured it out for about 20 years. And it just kind of recently came together for me when I had to do a keynote speech to 50 women. Um, and so it started out, I think I was a bit of a lost kid, and I say that openly now. I always gravitated towards arts and the sciences, but not math. So careers like architecture or anything like that, really, I never thought I would even, be welcomed in those circles. Exactly like Matthew, it's either archaeology or architecture that was kind of working in the built environment. So I went to architecture school after I went through fashion design school, pre-med courses, and then worked at the UN DP to help to build factories in Africa. And all of those experiences kind of led me to this place where I'm like, okay, I want to work in the built environment. I want to shape how people experience the world, how they see the world. Can I make the world better for them by providing the service to create spaces that are going to impact them? And so through that lens, or through that mission, I went through a series of different jobs. I had my own business as an entrepreneur and set up a design shop just as the subprime market was taking a dive in 2007, and perfect time to start a business. And we did design and branding, architectural, engineering, support, fabrication of furniture, and project management, everything you can think of under the sun. And I slowly learned that I really loved managing people. At that time, I also taught at an architecture school to kind of support. So I learned from students, and what I learned from them, I brought into the working world. And that relationship between the teaching and the owning and the doing was really magical for me. I then shifted into kind of my corporate life and went through a series of different senior positions, managing large projects around the globe, from all types of brands on the private side and in the public sector. And I learned more about me going through that, not about the importance of design, but more so about how you manage and lead, and how you can inspire and really exercise servant leadership in a way that's going to generate really impactful and sustainable results. After that, I drew a line and I moved over to kind of the management side and helping architects be better, helping all of the consultants be better when they work on projects. And so now currently where I am is kind of the synthesis of everything that I had just shared. Being at Blackstone in a dual role that was created. The first part is the head of real estate for the Americas, the corporate real estate. And the second part is global head of ESG for operations. And what that means is putting things into action that are doing good for people and planet. And that's ultimately what I wanted. But it took me about 30 plus years to get there.
Well, I'm glad you're there, because that's where we are. So that's a good place to be. It's funny because you said, working with people, building things. And so you're now in a place where you're building things and you're making an impact at the same time. And I think that it's fantastic. I was talking to a chairman of a big company, big health company, and he was switching jobs for a while. And he said, my mom doesn't think I can keep a job.
Same thing.
And so he's landed he's the chairman of Oracle Health right now, actually. And so we were joking, said, you can call your mom and say you finally found a job you can stick with, type of thing. So it's amazing, no matter how old you are, there's mom, telling you what to do and stuff. But
You're always a kid.
You're always a kid. Exactly. Thank goodness for that, if we can keep part of that as well. We founded our firm, Fifth Element, on the basis that leaders in their organizations, their businesses, can always do better when doing good. You guys are clearly early leaders, certainly in furniture. Matthew and Archie, you have the furniture. I noticed there was a furniture connection there too at one
He
point.
didn't know that. He just found that out about me on
I didn't
on
even,
this
literally
podcast.
right now, I wrote it down as a note, follow up on with that on that one.
And by virtue of what you shared, this is what we found out, and equally the impact that you're all making now and doing it together. So moving to Global Nomads, let's start with you, Courtney. Can you please share about the organization, why you are there now, who are the actual Global Nomads, and what's the mission?
Yeah, so I joined Global Nomads about 6 years ago, and for several reasons. The first, I think, was that the organization was at a really interesting inflection point. I was taking over from the founder who had been there for 20 years. So that was really interesting to me from a leadership perspective. It also took me out of US education reform, which I'd been in for a couple of decades and was feeling really stagnant and kind of like Groundhog Day. We were addressing the same issues over and over again. And so I was interested in this global body of work. And then I think probably most importantly is that aligned with my personal life. My husband is Black and from Zimbabwe. So my daughters are biracial. My family is multicultural. One of my daughters is part of the LGBTQ community. And the world just wasn't feeling, and still doesn't feel, particularly safe for them and their identities. And so Global Nomads was an opportunity for me to do my part to try to address that for them and for other young people like them. So that's why I'm here. And in terms of what Global Nomads does, we connect global youth across distance and difference. And we do that so that young people can get really comfortable engaging with people who are different than they are and approach those engagements with curiosity and respect rather than fear and judgment. And I think one of the things we do really uniquely is that we push against the cliche engagements that have young people saying, "Oh, you eat pizza, I eat pizza, we're cool." We really want them to be kind of perplexed by each other, but to be really interested in that and see the value in those differences. And ultimately, I think for Global Nomads, we're adults, I think, have gotten so good at dehumanizing one another, and we're betting on young people to be able to do it differently. And our vision is that they're going to create a world where everyone's inherent worth is honored and held sacred.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's spectacular, and it's so much of what we need, and why I'm glad we're chatting too, because I think there's a lot of alignment in what we're looking to do, and so it's fantastic, and I appreciate you sharing that. Matt, your son participated in, I think it's called the Content Creation Lab internship, right? And can you tell us why? Tell us about that. Why should all parents want their children to participate in programs like that develop empathy and understanding and how to get over, uncomfortable situations, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, well, I mean, personally, there were a couple things for me. One is my son lives a much different life than I lived. I grew up a number of years in a multi-race family with just a lot of natural hardship and diversity built into the experience. And he doesn't have that. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the experience is relatively homogenous. And so I'm always looking for ways to expose him and have him more connected to a global experience. And so that was selfishly was one thing, but the other part of it is that, I'm constantly, I mean, I'll give you another thing. It seems a little bit selfish, but there's a bigger picture. I'm also always hiring people and my roles. And when I'm going on hiring people, I'm looking for people who can learn asynchronously, people who can communicate well, people who do have empathy and natural leadership skills, good listening. And so, but we don't teach those things. We don't teach them in almost any level formally. If you're lucky, you get it informally sometimes, or you learn through experience. So maybe by the time you're in your 40s or something, you've learned you've picked up some of these things. So I wanted him to also have those things, but I'm also thinking of, in the future, when we need to have future leaders, we want them to be equipped with these types of skills and these experiences. And I certainly hope he's a future leader, and being able to be connected to an organization that's not our written motto to create these future leaders, but indirectly, that's partly what we're doing. Every single person, regardless of whether or not you have direct reports or a title, is a leader in a lot of ways. And so I just firmly believe the world needs more leaders, better human beings who are more connected holistically. And that to me is if as a parent, that's what I want to put myself in the best position possible to be successful, but also the best position possible to make a difference in the world. And that's sometimes a little W or the big W, but I thought Global Nomads was a unique way to do it. And to be honest, Mark, my son really drove the bus on that one. I just sort of introduced him to it. I didn't tell him what program to pick out, that he had to do it, how to. I mean, I really probably over-indexed on the other way of not micromanaging anything, to the point where at some point he was not sure how to use WhatsApp, and we had to fix that. But anyway, it worked out to be. But that's a perfect example of real life technology changing a new platform. Like that happens to all of us in the corporate world too. So another skill set and ability to figure these things out. But that's why I ultimately thought it was great for me, part of that program, and it was.
You should have him live with Courtney's family for a while to get some diversity.
You should do a swap.
I was gonna say, only if we get to trade. I'm not taking more, but I'll exchange.
No, that's fantastic. And you know, we skills training is so important, and it's a whole other topic. We work with a lot of untapped talent and people who have no degrees or informally incarcerated people, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many ways to, and so many things that are important now. And we've actually changed the name of soft skills to power skills now for leaders, because it's going to be with AI. Those are the skill sets that are really going to make it happen from now on. So good for you for getting him in that. And Arsha, you come from an interesting Armenian American background as well, and you've supported engagement with youth in Armenia. Speaking about diversity, and there's a huge Armenian community right down there in Glendale.
Oh, in Glendale, I know.
Exactly.
We're famous for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So speak to why it's critical for youth in countries like Armenia to be able to engage in cross-national, cross-cultural programs, and what you've been doing in that.
So, so there's a lot in there with
Yeah.
what you just asked, so I'll try and organize it. So what I've been doing about it, I'll leave at the end. I would like to say, actually, how Courtney and I bonded was really over storytelling. And what you just said about, you know, those with lack of education, you know, they're deserving, and you can still train them. Education's not key. It's actually story sharing is key.
I
Because
agree.
I think inherently we all have the ability to engage and help and support and understand one another, and it's through those stories. And so like that really is the anchor for me. It's how I lived my life. And so particularly in the Armenian community, there are some very dark and deep stories that kind of have been threaded through its history, and kind of changing that narrative and doing it one generation at a time has become kind of central to Armenia's transformation, and then those who actually come across stateside.
Right.
And so, you know, if there is a way, you can use the internet and you can use technology to bridge both the motherland and the U.S. and all those who've moved over. But then how you do it, I think, is really critical. And that's the second piece, is kind of networks. And so understanding the power of networks tied back to the historical kind of anchors, particularly in Armenia and other nations that have been affected with a similar history, I think is really important. The technology, the networks, the humanity, and the story sharing. And so the work that I want to, you know, commit to, particularly after I had shared that I spoke with these 50 women. They were Armenian women from the Armenian International Women's Association. They're all transplants from Armenia. They're now here, they're older, some have children. And so what I'm finding is that if you bring capital back and to allow for that infrastructure in Armenia to be built, then all you need is the technology tie-in, and organizations like Global Nomads can just bolt onto that. And so I think, you know, in terms of like my commitment, it's all tied back, you know, quite authentically to the power of sharing those stories and anchoring them into the technology to start to open up new worlds and possibilities.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks. You know, Maya Angelou is one of my favorite authors and whatnot. And you probably all know this quote, but I use it all the time. And you know, she said most people won't remember, or will forget what you said, will forget what you've done, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And
Yeah.
that is about storytelling, and it applies in everything. Applies in life, in dating, in business, the whole thing. So you're right on there. And everybody, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell said, you don't have to go to some exotic place to experience something or to hear a great story. Just go to the Walgreens pharmacy and ask the cashier, what's her story? And you'll find one, and it's probably pretty interesting too. So right on about that. And you know, we're all looking for that human stuff, right? That's important. And related to humanity, you know, the fourth industrial revolution actually is about technology, AI for sure now, and virtual reality, et cetera, but the fifth is about humanity. That's coming back now. And you know, in our firm, we focus on how impact and talent are so intersected and have to be sustainable and enduring results. And I notice Global Nomads talks about connecting youth across differences and distance. And I saw that one student testimonial was, quote, as a student to world changed me because I realized how easily I assumed things about people before I really got to know them. And that's happening everywhere right now, because of social media and because of everything. Could you all share, you know, what you think the value is for the students being global nomads, and just in general what you see they get from from being involved? And maybe start with Matt.
I think there's a couple things that are really critical. One is a sense of confidence, like just self-worth and confidence to me is unbelievable. The fact that you can go through a program like this, learn something. It's challenging, right? You're often put in uncomfortable situations, you know, promoting a concept on TV or online or on video, and then getting feedback and working with a group of people from different cultures. I mean, that's a challenge, but you build confidence every time you do something that's hard. You know, you get to do hard better next time. And so I think that is foundationally unbelievable. I think I'll tap on something that Arsha said earlier, which is networks. So finding a group of people, if you go through a cohort of 12 and you leave that with just one friend or one peer or somebody who's got your back in the future, that's also sometimes all you need, the difference. And we've seen that live, like a cohort making a difference in another human being's life in a meaningful way. So I think that is really, really powerful. And then I think just again, like just broadening horizon, understanding potential. Like, so it's so easy to be myopic when all you see is the world in front of you, but there is this massive opportunity. And then even just sometimes just a peek behind that gives you enough passion to go run through it. And then again, the fact that you have the confidence and the network to hopefully explore things, to me, that like triad is really, really powerful. And unfortunately, not enough kids around the world see that. Not enough kids have that. And so, you know, that's our passion, and hopefully bring that to as many people as possible.
Well, we might be able to help in that regard. How about from your perspective, Courtney, since you're like there all the time?
Yeah. I mean, I think to that last point, Matt just said that not all kids have the opportunity. I think one of the things we're trying to do is provide accessibility to young people who don't get to travel the world or don't have these profound, transformative physical exchange experiences, either because of the passport they hold or the resources they have. And so using technology allows us to reach young people all over the world and allow them to expand their perspectives beyond just their local community. And that is really important to us, to center those young people. We also are really committed to accessibility around engaging disabled youth. And so all of our content has sign language and captioning, and so really looking to bring young people who are typically marginalized into the center of our work so they have similar opportunities. And I think, you know, to piggyback on Arsha's comment about storytelling, I think the other value that we offer is that we make everyone's story of value. So even though so much of this exchange happens from countries like the United States and others like it, it isn't set up as sort of a charity model where we're here to help you. It's we're here to learn from you. And so we create these experiences where everyone has equal value and profound stories to share. And that I think is really important to young people around the world who might not have had their stories valued or had the opportunity to share them before.
Yeah, that's spectacular. Got to start pen pals over again. Arsha, what about you?
So I definitely, I think it's critical to have a framework, a structure, and a strategy that Global Nomads has, because if I just look at my own life, without being able to have my stories resonate with someone, right? Like doing that legwork by myself, I would not have been fortunate enough to get here. And the problem with that is that that's just one person, and you need this super highway to take these kind of valued stories and then translate them, I think, into executable, trainable, tactical skills that are then pathways to evolving an individual's, a child's life. That's where you get our future leaders from. Like one example, Courtney, you have the architecture program, and I just like I read it again because I remember, and the way in which a particular program or discipline is actually approached, the lens in which it's applied, is not seen or formalized in a formal education. So looking more empathetically at most of the different disciplines that would be maybe more at the technical level, it just transforms your world. And then to be able to kind of speak through that, as the students speak through that, they're shaping what our world will look like. And this is the bridge to get there.
Yeah, and if I could add on, I think because part of why I think the experiences are so powerful is because we're letting young people design them themselves. So we've positioned our youth as our curriculum designers. And so they're speaking a language that resonates with their global peers, and the lens that they put on these really knotty, complex, challenging issues are through the lived experience of being a teenager in this, wacky world that we're living in. I mean, they're about to be handed a whole pile of mess as adults to solve, and it seems right that they should be the ones figuring out how to be equipped to take those challenges on.
What I love is that you're all talking about experiences, and I got to go back to the whole thing about talent. Everything we focus on is not years of experience or your responsibilities on your resume. It's actual experiences that you've had that you will be able to bring forward to get stuff done. And so that's invaluable about what you're bringing to the kids there and what they're bringing to each other also, because that is life. That is what you do, type of thing. And that's everything that your brain and everything bases on. What you're going to do forward is experiences that you've had before. So it's fantastic that you're doing that. And those are the in fact, I started to call them the not only the future leaders who care, but the future present leaders who care, because they're not even future ones anymore. They are right now the leaders who care. So
Can I add something, Mark?
of course not.
Of course not.
No,
Oh,
I'm just kidding.
no, it's like Global Nomads is it's the perfect case study for how you put talk into action. And it's a blueprint for life. And we are in a kind of maker generation now, people who want to make things, to solve for things. But you need that kind of you need those foundational elements before you start to do the making. And so that's why I find a lot of the programs are so unique. So I just want to share that. Courtney,
No,
that's a testament to you, of course.
and it's interesting what you say, because I've had people tell me that my kids don't even know how to make a phone call now, a real phone call type of thing, or they don't know how to, how do they do a speech and start to do the speech. I mean, we used to learn some of that in standing in front of our classroom, if you will, but there are foundational items, and you will have another conversation on a program called Nonflict that Courtney knows about, that is foundational too, in a lot of ways, on how to look at conflict differently. But I think what you're doing is critically important, and I'll throw it out right here now too. I was going to say it afterwards. We just started doing Leaders Who Care for 8 to 18-year-olds as well, and I'm bringing on a 10-year-old the other day that has written 4 books already, a 13-year-old girl from Liberia that is starting a skincare company that, because that kids can be empowered in their own skin, things like that. there's
Mhm.
great, you know, they talk about young people being whatever. They're awesome. There's brilliant young people all over the place. And I'm so excited that what you are doing to support kids on that is super important. And as we say in LA, we'll have to leave them wanting more because we have to have a sequel. So I guess we'll have to do that type of thing. But one last question I want to ask you here is, a client told me, you know, a few years ago, he said, you know, the year 2020 was the year that flew by slowly. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And we kind of feel that it's 2020 was yesterday and years ago, almost all at the same time. With all that happening, and we're fast into 2024 now, can you each say what you're most grateful for and what you're most hopeful for? And why don't we start with you, Courtney?
Yeah, so I think as I look back over, those were really tough years, particularly to lead a nonprofit. And I think what I'm grateful for is that we're still standing. Not all nonprofit organizations are. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I think some of the ways that we were forced to innovate and shift, which were painful at the time, are serving us really well now. So I'm grateful for that.
Cool. And
Um,
hopefully.
and hopeful. Hopeful is challenging right now, but I would say that, you know, I'm reminded that we had a workshop just a couple of months ago where a group of our young people who had designed an environmental justice curriculum were presenting the curriculum to a group of educators. And one of the educators asked the youth, what do you need from the teachers who are going to deliver this environmental justice curriculum? What do you need from us? And one of the young people said, we need you to be hopeful. And so that resonates, or that sort of echoes in my mind a lot. And so with that in mind, I'm going to be hopeful that we're going to find a way to address the damage we've done to each other and to the world, and find a way forward to a more just world.
Yeah, that's brilliant on your part and that person's part. Wow. Matt.
Yeah, I wake up every day and say 3 gratitudes, which is a practice I've been doing for a little while. And so for me, it's hard to narrow it down to one thing, but I'd say the last few years was another opportunity to fight a lot of challenge and get to the other side. And I just firmly believe that when you do that, you continue to build that muscle and you get stronger for whatever the world's going to throw at you. And so I'd say I'm grateful for the time that allowed me for sort of self-reflection, for taking on new opportunities, including G&G, to be honest. Other things that refocus my energy on being a good father and a good leader, and to really, again, like just make a better commitment to myself to make an impact. And so I'm an eternal optimist. For me, what's hopeful is that the fact that we've been having conversations like this is important, regardless of where you think the pendulum is swinging in terms of progress. I believe it always does move in the right direction. And, the idea of that empathy no longer is a weird thing to talk about at work, or that we talk about soft skills as power skills, Mark. And like the fact that we're educating, hopefully, our global youth to be better leaders and not relying just on those white males who are in their 50s to make change. Like that's a bad place for the world to be. And so the fact that we're having better conversations, thinking more broadly, it's not perfect by any stretch. It's so far from perfect, but it's better than it's ever been. The reality is that's the truth. And so the more we can have these conversations, the more we can bring great, smart people into the fold and engage every generation, every sort of level of diversity. That to me is something to be really optimistic about.
Yeah, well said. Thanks. That's great stuff. Well, Arsha, what about you?
Mine is, I thought about this question, and I'm gonna keep it really simple. I am so grateful that I'm still here, and I have found a way to ratchet up in line. That's something authentic for me. And where the gratitude comes is that I actually now have a chance to share that with other women, with other children. I had to look at a piece of art that was made by like a 6-year-old last week to see if, there was, what direction she could take. So being able to help others spread the word, help to encourage looking at things more tactically so that you can actually achieve the things you want to achieve, being able to have those conversations and share those stories is what I'm most grateful for. And then in terms of, what keeps me hopeful and what I am hopeful for is that there's this kind of relentless search for understanding why we're here as a collective. And then as individuals, like what's your personal why, like Simon Sinek always says, to kind of train you through that, again, anchoring into the stories. Because I had said, it's a maker generation. It actually is. It's just people don't know it. It's a maker generation living embedded in a digital world. And that's a really interesting intersection. And I'm hopeful because I think just humanity, we want to solve for things. It's our nature. We're not in the business of wanting naturally to destroy things. It's more to make them and create them. And I don't think that will ever subside. So.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant too. Well, I'm certainly grateful that you guys are truly leaders who care, and you're helping other young people become leaders who care too. And I'm as a result, I'm hopeful that so many good things will happen. The world's always had to overcome stuff. There's a lot to overcome now for sure, but the only way to do it is with leaders who care, not to be cute, but that's what has to happen. And I was hopeful that one of your dogs would come into this, though, and just add a little extra entertainment. But
I am working on one, but so maybe next time I'll make sure.
Okay, great. Then we have something to look forward to. That's awesome. Thank you so much for being who you are. Thank you so much for being on this series, and onward and forward, right?
Right.
That's right.
Thank you, Mark.
You, Mark.
Thanks, everyone.